Hello, hello, everyone. It's Friday and it's our special day with Thorne Waya Davis. And today we're going to be talking about the last six signs. That would be Libra through Pisces. Is that right? I think Virgo or Libra. Yeah, I think we got through Virgo and then we're going to start with Libra. Um, but first we wanted to hold off on signs for a second and talk about something relevant that is relevant to today's discussion at the Moira Press. Someone got kind of upset about a question I asked on the page. I asked the question of, do you think personality disorders are real, or do you think a person is just their chart? Like for example, if someone says you're a narcissist, we might say, oh, you're just a Leo with the Sun Jupiter conjunct in Leo. You're just your chart. You're not bad or good. You just are who you are. That was the point of the question. But this person took offense and felt like that was an ableist question. So I want to just do an ableism check with Thorne to see, first of all, Thorne, okay, what is ableism? Thorne's saying ableism is any type of action or perspective or philosophy or opinion or anything, including those things that would be more against those who are deaf, deaf-blind, deaf, with different issues. And then in society, it perceives us as having a disability. So that kind of behavior or thought that's against a person because of those things, or oppressive, it's an oppressive thought. It's not, something is not, a good or correct. Okay, so if my question was against people who have personality disorders, if I said people with personality disorders are awful, or if I said people with personality disorders are not real, I mean, maybe that would be against them, but I don't see how asking if people, do you believe that personality disorders are real, or do you think people are just their chart, is that against people? Thorne saying no. I disagree with that. That's not against people. I feel that it's very possible that perhaps this person maybe doesn't fully understand the context of the question. That could be one thing. It could be that they themselves are very intrinsically involved with, that's it has to do with who they are as a person, a disabled person, and they're very, they're advocating for people with disabilities. So they can't step outside that and say, oh, maybe the question is a different context. It's not really directly related to their experience. Something like that. Those two options are what I would think of. They couldn't relate to your question, and maybe there's a misunderstanding, and they kind of got upset. So, well, but I'm upset too because I'm not against people with disabilities. I'm here to support people with disabilities. So I would not say I'm ableist. I would say I'm the opposite of I'm anti-ableist. I'm saying right. And I feel that your question was honestly asked with curiosity. I feel like I know your personality. You're very inquisitive and you want to know and understand, things. And maybe they didn't realize that because, it's online. You can't really see the tone. You can't really feel the connection. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know. Plus, you need to remember that Mercury is retrograde and that's happening soon. So maybe that's another factor, another layer of where now we're recognizing, oh, there's weird communication things happening or misunderstandings or things like that. So that's just putting it out there. Yeah, I mean, why do these names affect me so much? I've been called racist, I've been called anti-trans, and the reason they bother me is because I'm anti-racist. Like I'm not only not racist, I'm anti-racism. I'm anti-ableism. Like so. the reason for me asking that question is to elevate us beyond labels in some ways and to say the chart is not oppressive at all. If someone calls you a narcissist, you can say, my chart is it's strong of heart, yes, but I'm not trying to be against anyone. It's like I feel like the chart can liberate us from label oppression, and that's what I'm talking about. And also, I do feel that the whole, point of ableism and all these different isms is to connected with capitalism and the system itself. And so when people are very stuck or rooted in their, personality is very rooted, where they already have experienced fighting against the system, then they maybe, there's a misunderstanding that the question is outside of that context. But I'm curious about this, that maybe there's a misunderstanding, they got upset, and so I do agree with you that the chart can liberate us and the chart can help us to grow and improve and become better and better humans. And each person has that journey. Many people are not like us. Well, we look at it and we say, oh, there's a lot of different layers connected to the chart. I can see and recognize where those things are, overlaid. And not everyone has that full skill set yet. So I'm just putting it out there. So hopefully that helps. That helps a lot because I think, you know, astrology knows more sometimes than the system. And people always assume I'm, uh, in the system and I'm a gorilla. I'm like, ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm outside the system. I'm beyond the system. I'm meta system. Like astrology is looking down at the system like you don't know that much system. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like when I get called these names, like you're ableist and all these things, I'm like, you don't know me. Like I'm an astrological extremist. If you want to call me something, I'm an astrological extreme guerrilla fighter, actually fighting against oppression. And so I feel really like upset when I get called names that are just against who I am. And I feel that Thorne's saying it doesn't matter the fact that we tend to have those Scorpio parts of us that are like, whoa, but at the same time, we can connect with those parts where we don't have to be so aggravated. Um, you know, it's like, okay, you feel this and you sent that over to me. Okay, that's fine. I will show you that I'm not going to fight back. I will show you my truth, you know, and I feel that that's a higher perspective of how that Scorpio energy can move through and how, it can be shown instead of, the, unevolved energy of just wrestling and being upset and getting all growly, kind of thing. So if that makes sense. Yeah. Well, one thing I've learned in my journey as a teacher is that when there's a pinch point, like like something, some student and or community member is not understanding or they're against what I say, it's often because they don't understand the whole picture. It's like, no, I'm an astrological extremist asking this question. I'm not the man, you know what I mean? It's like, and so they don't have the whole picture. And so in that way, I'm trying to type back and type, but they can't see the whole picture unless I'm on a video, and then they can see, oh, that's Andy talking. Oh, I see what the point is. But I mean, but then how much do you think, Thorne, that it's our job as teachers to make night? Like, if someone's against us, does that mean we have to fix it, or what do you think? Thorne saying, I do feel that there's partly related, that is part of our job as teachers to, point out certain things and say, okay, there's these things, and clarify these things, and then to a line of where if the person is continuing to just argue and argue and argue, that's where our boundary stops. And then we say, we've already showed you these things. If you're stubborn and you're still going on, that means that you need to find your answer somewhere else. And then just leave it at that. Interesting. Yeah. Well, oh, I feel that's part of related to Saturn, where there's a boundary of how to, be supportive and then also draw a line and keep ourselves safe at the same time. As teachers, we need to take care of ourselves and then serve others as well. So we can't take care of ourselves, then we can't fully show up to serve others either. So I think, it's a catch-22 of, those things. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I want to bring up this point that philosophy is I think it's called dialectic art. And it means it's like a dialogue-based learning method. So in philosophy conferences, what they do is they give a talk. And then the students ask all these questions that are against the talk. They're like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And that is seen as a good discussion in philosophy groups. And I think astrology is close to philosophy. It's a technical philosophy, maybe, where when the students get upset, in some ways, I think, okay, now we're on a good discussion, because that's philosophy learning at its best. What do you think of that? Thorne saying, well, in a way, it's the way of where it's possible that there's a space and everyone has that opportunity to say something in that space or sign something or, and without being looked down upon. And it's a liberating space, for the mind, so where people can understand and relate to each other, not like I'm better than you or this is better than you. It's peers. And so that makes me think of where Plato and Socrates, the great philosophers, they had those open discussions. They were allowed to challenge each other and, discuss and say things. And so I think allowing that challenge to each other is great, but in the end, we still can accept and respect each other in the opposite perspectives, in the past. So I wish that today we could see more of that similar understanding and, how to, operate with that philosophy and that kind of thing. Okay, it makes me think of safe space versus brave space. Have you heard of brave space? So can you explain to people what is brave space, safe space? So brave space means where we can open up and be vulnerable. We can actually put ourselves out there, and that maybe there's a challenge with, your a thought that's put out there. You might not agree in that space. You all can be brave though to open up and be putting yourself out there, and that the other person will be the same there with you, and that you respect each other. And there'll be a common courtesy there and a humanity in the experience. And then a safe space it can be a little bit biased, I feel like, because it's like who is being comfortable there? Who is being provided that safety to be heard in the heart and mind? And, sometimes there's inequities in that, in my perspective, that of a safe space. But at the same time, there is a need for a safe space. So the safe space means that, a person who feels heartbroken or insulted, or they can access that space knowing that they will have a moment or a time where they can put themselves out there and be vulnerable, and actually they can go through the process of feeling heard in their heart and their mind, and understand and supported and all that. And yes, that's a good thing, but at the same time, they're not allowed to really completely process all that's involved there. Whereas in a brave space, it will offer that opportunity for all people to really be involved. So, and hopefully there's an opportunity for collective healing to happen at the same time. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because is the Moira Press a safe space? I would say no. But I personally have a Sun Mercury square Mars. My chart is not a safety chart, right? It's a guerrilla fighter warrior chart where we're fighting against the man, against the system to try to subvert the system, right? By asking questions that are brave, and so I think it's funny, Jay-Z, right? Jay-Z. Okay, so many years ago, and Jay-Z is involved with the queer community, which he would say that too. I mean, I'm not like speaking out of line, but when I was at his house like 20 years ago, he was like shooting BB guns in the house. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, he said, I'm trying to create an unsafe space. It made me laugh so hard because he's like I mean, he's an Aries rising with Mars and Scorpio. Like his chart is not a safety chart, right? And so I think that I learned something from him of like you can be in this very safe space community, but if your chart's a rager, like that's you. And also, yeah, I think at the same time, I would view that as like people who have charts like that, they are people who are willing to stretch in the edge. Um, they're stretched the edges and they feel the edge of how far things can go and where you can hit them and but it's not in a mean way. It's more of curiosity, wanting to understand, wanting to, you know, do some research of where the edges are and also challenge. Like Dana said last week, uh, you know, with the service heart, like how can we hold that worker heart and still work to feel that edge while allowing the overlap of unsafe spaces with brave spaces? And how can that we bridge that? Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, we astrologers have to think God made each chart for a reason, right? And I feel for my Sun, Mercury square Mars, the best reason God is making me still is to fight where the system is oppressing people. Like with diagnosis, there's a lot of oppression, and people feel limited with a diagnosis. And we're trying to uncover where the limits are and get rid of those and say we can use the chart for, above a diagnosis and all this stuff. And it's like, without the square to Mars, I wouldn't have enough passion to fight for that, you know? And that's a beautiful thing. It fits who you are. And so it's fascinating because other people, they fight hard to discover parts of themselves and they apply those labels and they fit. And it's interesting because for me it's a conflict of where the system is and how can I, subvert that by using the labels that they've used to oppress me. So it's not necessarily a good oppression, but I can use it for myself and kind of twist it around. I can flip it around. I can flip the page on them on the system. So is that is that reclamation? Like how queer people reclaim the word queer. It used to be an insult. Now we're like, we know we're queer and we accept it. That's reclamation. Yeah. Or even remediation, you know, uh, to heal something in the cracks inside or something that's been fissured inside. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having that discussion with me. Is there anything else you want to say about ableism in astrology or anything? I do want to add just a comment, a short comment. It's interesting for me because like I'm a person who's deaf and queer and trans and non-binary and all these things, and I exist in this world of astrology. And it's mostly a minority, it's mostly hearing people. So they are used to, one way or their way of, expressing and talking. And so in this way, I feel that it's good that we are uncovering the different perspectives of how to use language and how to, show their ways, not the only way. With astrology, people like me do offer a different perspective, and there's a benefit to that perspective. Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, like, what's it mean? And I know you wanted to talk short about this is such a good discussion, but what's it mean? Okay, I do agree. Okay, okay, okay. Okay, because this is where you're like a smart theorist. I'm like, I want to discuss with Thorne ableism because you're like smart about that stuff. So it's like, um, what's it mean to be anti-ableist? Because I want to be that. What's that look like? Well, if we wanted to show that it's like basically an advocate, number one, it's advocacy and speaking up for those who are maybe exhausted and, for exhausted and advocating for their self and their own disability and personality disorders or mental health or all those things, advocating. And I think you already do that, intrinsically. So that's one. Also, opening up the discussion and putting it out there to see what they think. You could do that. And, I think that you're on the right track already. And also, another way to pull in, their voices was, and you're already kind of doing that. You brought me on the show, for example, and I think that's a great success. So I think those are three examples that are check marks, and you're doing good. You're already on the path. Yeah. So interesting. Thank you. I mean, I think this show we have is anti-ableism, like at its best. Like, because you're kind of, well, we're both in charge of the show, but it's really for the deaf community and just for you to have a voice in general, because you're like one leader in astrology, but people can't meet you, or they have not yet met you. Okay. So we're trying to provide a brave space where they can meet you and be with you. Um, but I do think, um, like, I mean, okay, I got lost. We're talking about anti, yeah, related to anti-ableism. What's that look like? What's that look like? Yeah, I personally don't want people to be limited by any, people are always like flinging around personality disorder names, like you narcissist, you have BPD. Like recently, my friend had a breakup, and his ex is like, he's BPD. He's like borderline personality disorder. And I'm like, oh, really? Like I've known him for like 12 years. He's also helped like thousands of people. So that's what I'm fighting against is people just like slinging around names when they're mad at people. Yes, and also I feel that part of where how sometimes we, generally we get so rooted or entrenched with the labels because we are still trying to figure out how to subvert that system that oppresses us. And really, from a psychological and medical perspective, these labels is like how to get rid of them. And some people become so comfortable with that label. They say, I'm a narcissist, I accept it. But then they don't do the work to actually release that label. So in the same idea as where that whole aspect with, you know, neurodivergency, of where for a long time, the mental health and the psychological, disability labels, mental illness, and all this kind of stuff, they were kind of oppressive and looking down upon people. And now they're saying, no, the neurodivergency people are saying this is cool. We are neurodivergence is beautiful, how the brain can see things from different perspectives and all these things, and how we can, our bodies do things differently. And I think that's fine. That's part of the human experience. So sometimes it can become they can become comfortable with that label, and they can say, oh, they can kind of sink into that label, but we can say there's a way of releasing the label where we know that they have it internalized, but still they're not complicit with the system. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, because, in the reason this question came up in Facebook today is because in Tuesday class, we're talking about astrological diagnosis. So, in my old age, an astrological diagnosis looks like a whole page with circles and the aspects of personality on each circle. Like I'll be doing a talk this March 16th on astrology and bipolarism. And in the article, I talk about our diagnosis might be four wheels, four aspects of personality, because we recognize four poles in one person, not two. We recognize you could have four or five. And then maybe naming each one, then looking at the timing to it. Oh, it's like really involved. So our diagnosis is so much more complex than one word like bipolar. Like we're not giving people a one word label. We're saying you are a very complex being, and we're going to describe you and your machine, your specific machine, which is not like any other machine. So we actually are just so much more complex than the system that I can see where someone would think I'm anti or I'm ableist, but really I'm just above the system. Like I'm beyond the system. Like the system is like down here. But that's why I asked the question, was to try to get the discussion going, to get learning happening, to uncover the differences. And where, capitalism and where authoritarianism and all these things, the patriarchy and all of that is kind of enmeshed, is with religion too, is it's all kind of enmeshed. And I think so, yeah, it's so enmeshed that they are kind of talking to each other, that they, it's like a tree, and they push it onto us, where there's different parts that we're trying to fight against, but at the same time, they want to divide us. So for us, we have to remember that at the end of the day, our label, whatever our connection is, we need to be a whole all together. We need to integrate it all together. And we have our neurodivergence, we have our different perspectives, all these things. And the bottom line is that all of us are human, and all of us can recognize that something's wrong. And so, therefore, to elevate that awareness that it's human knowledge, and we say, how can we continue to subvert the system? And how can we all play our roles? Because we all are not supposed to fight. All of us have different roles. And so somehow we are all, still affecting each other and supporting each other, like a tree. And those are two different trees, actually. So that's a good point. Like the tree of mental health services is growing separately and next to the tree of astrology, right? So that's a good point. It's like, I know I made you talk about this, but you're so good at this because you're a theorist. Okay, I accept. Okay, okay, good. I'm relieved. Don't be mad at me. Okay. Okay. I'm not upset. Okay, okay. It's a great conversation because, and it's not like heavy. I feel like we're not heavy. We are light theorists about it. But that point is that I'm not chopping down that tree of the system labeling people. I understand that that tree nourishes some people. But if that tree is like fallen on you and is choking you, then yeah, then come over to our tree and sit under it and smell the flowers. It's just different, you know? Exactly. And also, since we're talking about trees, one cool thing that I found out a while ago about trees is that when a tree becomes old, it will naturally crack open. It'll crack open, and then part of it will fall down on the ground, and it will become a nurse log. So it will actually become that because it will feed new trees, like the baby trees will grow out of it. So, oh my God, that's such a, or the new plants will grow out of it, like mushrooms and flowers and all that kind of stuff, and it will become a whole new ecosystem. Oh my God, that's such a good metaphor for what's happening. I feel like the tree of labeling people with mental health diagnosis is in some ways cracking open. And the astrologers are saying, can we grow some new ideas on this tree that doesn't work for everyone? Right? I've been fighting mental illness labels for a long time. It started with my ex, who was labeled with all these things. And I finally just taught them their chart, and that healed them from all these just labels, you know? So I've been fighting this for a long time for very personal reasons, for sure. And I feel that we when we pay attention to nature, we can really learn a lot from nature and how that applies to us, like an ecosystem. Yeah. Well, you know, the ancient astrologers would do that all the time. They're the teleologist people, the development theorists of old. They would compare people to plants all the time. If they didn't know how to analyze a chart problem, they would say, well, what if it was a plant? You know, they say, well, you know, like for example, with astrological remediation, they would say, if a plant is growing and it falls over, what do you do? And they'd be like, well, you get a stake and you put it up and you put the plant back up, you know? And it's like, that's like us astrologers who are supporting people who have fallen. We're like, oh no, the chart has fallen. And we're like staking them up and like supporting them like a plant, you know? Yes. That's so interesting. That's the part of where, if when we notice a person and their journey, of the chart and it's falling, but sometimes they don't realize it, then that means we need to wait and allow them to come to us instead of going to them and saying, oh, I've noticed that your tree, you know, because they will have to, you know, then they'll be kind of resenting that and be like, don't control me. So I think that's where it's interesting, that part where some people are like, I know them very well and I know their chart, and I'm like, ooh, yeah, soon they're gonna have that transit hitting them. I'll just wait and watch. And if they come to me, then yeah, I'll have to see. And then if they come to me, then it's like, um, you know, then they say, I noticed this and that. And I said, okay, if you need, what do you need from me? You know, I said, that's a great point. You know, what do you think about this topic? That astrology is identity politics. And the reason I says is because, you know, it's political to say you are this. The transit is happening to you this. That's like labeling a person and being like, you are a boy. You are a girl. That's political. That's identity politics. Yeah, that's misgendering them anyway. Yeah. Well, you could mischart them. But I guess my point is you're saying wait for them to come to you. And the reason for that is it's very sticky of how we can oppress people with their chart information, be like, well, you are blah blah blah, you blah blah blah. It's identity politics, and you have to treat it with like kid gloves. Like, for me, that approach is basically the bottom line is respect. You know, if I respect you enough to allow you to come to me, and I'm not gonna try to oppress you. I know this and this about you. Yeah, no. I can watch and I can support you from afar. But at the same time, I can't push you. It's like, no, you need to come to me. I'm not even going to pull you to me. That's not my job. Yeah, that's good ethics. I mean, I feel like that's basic. Well, I don't think that's like ubiquitously taught that that's an ethic, but it should be. Yeah, it should be taught. Yeah, I agree. Good thing you're a teacher. Yeah, yes, yes. So wait, this is an aside, but are you teaching a class on astrology soon for the deaf? Do you have a class coming up? Yes, I do have. It's a webinar coming soon in April. Yeah. And it's all we're in the logistics process, but yeah, it will be in April. And I believe it's on the 24th. I'll have to double check my schedule. But yes, it's a general basic, lecture about how to use the chart, like a guide for your life, how to get to know your chart like a map, how to use it as a tool, how to get to know yourself better, how to do all these things, and how do you, work with that and how to understand that better. Because I feel that that sets a foundation for what, when you have the foundation in place, then everything else can, come out of that, can grow out of that. So how can people get to that class? It will be advertised soon. Okay, okay. Okay, so back to the topic of the day, which is, okay, let's discuss the word thrivalism. Because like when the person called me an ableist, I was like, no, I'm a thrivalist, okay? And I think everyone should be thriving, not just some people. So, do you think thrivalism is like ableism, or are they different? Okay, no. I feel that they're different because the word thrive suggests, from my understanding, is in my lens, is as a queer, non-binary, trans person, is let's see, that it's not just surviving, and kind of like school of hard knocks and, just getting through the day. It's actually going beyond that and saying, okay, I have learned how to thrive. I've earned the right to thrive. I really want this. I really want to be fed. I really want to be full. And I exist, period. I'm not allowing the system to critique me, essentially. And so thriving is in a specific way with that. It's where we give ourselves the permission to, it's like self-empowerment, essentially. And with thrivalists, I would say it's that applies to the philosophy of where every one of us has the right to thrive and not just survive. And so I think that's different than ableism. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I think in ableism, the idea is that some people are able and some people are not, and there's like an inequity thing happening. But in thrivalism, which I kind of made up that word, but I'm sure it's out there. But in my vision, everyone, doesn't matter what your diagnosis is or whatever your chart is or what aspects you have, you can thrive. You can. It just depends on how you use it. And exactly, and it depends on how the person chooses to use it or not use it, because and again, I think it's interesting because today, the topic, I'm sorry, in today's modern society, it's quote unquote modern. I don't know how modern it is, but disabled and abled, like, the concept of abled bodied and disabled bodies, the system would view me as automatically disabled because I'm deaf and I have a vision issue too. And so at the same time, I know that that is not, really applied to me. That's not who I am. It's like no. And so it is like a it's like a fine line of where that definition is, where does ableism, what does it look like? Because, the root is just different than today of what it looks like now, because identity politics and society and everything, and, just the intention. And if we go back in time into the root, or the suffix even, then that shows where that language has actually evolved from, the concept. Well, if you take it back to the Greek language, ism comes from the Greek ending idsto. It's idsdom. It's so idsto means to make a thing about whatever the root is. So able isdo means to make something about being able to do something. That's all it means. But the ism makes it into a thing. Like an ableism is everything connected to the ability to do things or not. That's all it means. But ableism has become a negative connotation of like, it's like ableism. It's like the like oppressing people depending on what they can and can't do, right? Yes. It's not only oppression, but also it's feeding into that system, the capitalist system of where we divide it and we separate, kind of thing. Yeah. Whereas thrivalism is not yet gotten a negative, connotation because it's kind of a new concept, but it's like it would be everything connected to the idea of thriving. That's all it means. Right. And also, have you seen the movie The Avatar? No. Oh, you need to see that movie. You need to watch that because it applies back to this point of what we're talking about. Um, because in the movie, they have a specific a tree called the mother tree. And the mother tree feeds the whole forest. So in the application of thriving, it's like, how can that root, um, the root feed the community while at the same time recognizing all of the diverse specialties in our different ways? That would be cool. Interesting. That's well, okay. In the Bible, they say that the strong people are here to support the meek people. Now, that word meek is kind of feels a little like oppressive to me, like you're meek. But what it means is the strong people are here to support people who are maybe not strong right now, or someone who's feeling weak inside or their heart's broken. Then the strong people should come and support them. And that's God's way of the plan. If you think about people who go to the hospital because they're sick, well, they're meek in that moment. They're like, oh, I'm sick. But the strong hospital people just take care of them until they're better, right? Like, that's a beautiful thing. Yes. And also, it's a discussion of words like the meek. It's like maybe it could be better applied to in the way of vulnerable because of that person is vulnerable, physically vulnerable or emotionally vulnerable or mentally vulnerable. And if they're at the hospital because that's a place for the vulnerable, they need support. And so also I think the other word, humble. Yeah, because the strong and there's humble, and both of them can exist as well, and they can coexist. And so I don't feel that there's a divide or a separation, and I feel that there's a relationship between those two. However, the society at large has, uh, they know that language is a weapon, or it can be used as a weapon. And so um, to change definitions, of what it really means with humans and the human experience. So, yeah, but I think you're right, right. Semantics, it was the discussion of language and what it means. I think, philosophy is everything semantics, like the first thing we need to do is define ableism and then define thrivalism and we need an operational definition, whatever, like a definition for right now. And so it's all semantics of discussion of words and vocabulary and what things mean and unpacking that. But I do think that in a thrivalist society, community, or culture, all the people, including the people who have been given a diagnosis of a personality disorder, can thrive with their personality. Like we don't want anyone to be like downtrodden and it's like, oh, did you get a diagnosis of a personality disorder? Okay, let's look at your chart and see how you can thrive. Like it's just not an oppression perspective. Right, and that makes me think of how that we can bridge that like with modern medicine of how we can bridge that and make that connection and make that link of this and this, herbalism, plant medicine, natural medicine, holistic medicine, with energy healing and all these kinds of things, how can we bridge that? And, the tree thing comes up again of just how can they cross over and honor each other and honor that bridge and all that stuff, because of course we know that Western medicine doesn't heal everything, but natural medicine is really good for many things, but it can't resolve everything either. So it's that balance of it's a balance, you know, and we need that balance. That's one thing. And then another thought that's coming to mind when you're talking about that is like indigenous people, like Native Americans, for many, many years, for hundreds of years and hundreds of generations, they have envisioned saying when the whole tree is peaceful and it's set up again, when all the people meet there with that tree, then that's when the whole world will be at peace. Wow. I kind of want to stop there. That's just so like peace, No, but no, that's a good point. I mean, I think I love how you're bringing in the tree. It's like, I think astrology is like a thought tree, and it's got like many branches and it's like, but we're saying come sit under our tree and enjoy yourself, enjoy astrology, enjoy the astrology discussion with us. Yeah. Man, I feel so much better. Oh, good. I'm happy my Cancer moon can help you and support you. Well, I just felt like that's just like that's not me. Like I'm not an ableist. I'm just not. You know. No, no, you're not. And I feel that sometimes when people can't really connect with the full context or the full picture, then that causes a crack in, it causes a disconnect. Yeah. Hopefully this helps clarify some of the things. Yeah. Yeah, I invited that person to come on YouTube with us and discuss with us, not today, but just in general. And they declined. But when there's a pinch point or some thing, I'm like, oh, come, we need a more further discussion. Often when people get all upset, really they're just thinking so hard that they have like all this stuff they want to say. And I'm like, you're not really upset. You just are like stimming on the topic. And it's like, come on YouTube with me and let's discuss the topic. Like, but when you come saying I'm an ableist, like, oh, like then I'm a little bit like, I'm going to bring my bodyguard though. you know? Yeah, and you can count me on your team of bodyguards. Yeah, you're the scariest one. Oh, for sure. I am one of the scary ones. Yeah, I've seen your chart. Anyway, are you sure you're okay with our discussion today? Yes, it was great. It felt good. It didn't feel heavy. Like I was a little bit like on the fence about it, but it felt there was a good flow and it's good. I think some of your most important work in the community is around these topics. And that was why I was like, oh, it's a good chance to really dig with Thorne on their genius things, So, oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. So. All right. Well, I love you. I'll see you tomorrow at the Deaf Cafe. Yes, tomorrow. All right. That's Woodstock Cafe, by the way, everyone. It's in Portland, Oregon. And it's supported, it's a support local businesses, deaf-owned businesses, queer-owned. So you should support that business. Yeah. The Woodstock Cafe, it's a deaf-owned coffee shop, deaf-owned, deaf-run, deaf-blind owned as well. Awesome. All right. I love you, Thorne. I'll see you tomorrow. All right. Bye.